This week, we explore curiosity, why it's important, and ways to re-spark it in your everyday life.
Perfect. Good morning, good afternoon, what's
Good
up?
evening.
Or that. Hope you're doing good. Welcome to the couch for episode 180-something, almost at 200. So we appreciate you guys listening all along the way.
Baby, man, I'm excited. Yeah, 180-something. That's wild. Super wild when you really think about it. I was on a different podcast interview the other day, and they were asking questions about like, oh, how'd y'all get started and all this stuff, and it really like had me reflecting, like, man, it's really been a minute
Since we started the podcast?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then it's crazy when you think about some of the people who've like really been doing this for years. It is not light work. People ask me about doing podcasts all the time, and I've seen a lot of podcasts start and a lot of podcasts drop off. So definitely would encourage people, if you do feel like you have something to say, start a YouTube channel, start a podcast, like whatever it is, like do it. I think it's a pretty cool way to like get your thoughts out and for you to even process your own thoughts sometimes.
Yeah, that's like one of my favorite things is it's so cathartic, and we get to explore topics that we're interested in as well and have really dope guests and ask them really great questions, that sometimes they be charging like $400 an hour for. So also hype about that.
So Carlie, why did you want to talk about curiosity today?
Originally, the thought was sparked from our conversation on detachment, and curiosity came up as one of the ways, like if you're more curious in your life, it helps you be able to practice non-attachment. But then also, I've been watching a lot of Sherlock Holmes lately, and, he's just such a curious individual in general, and I'm like, man, like, we should probably explore this and why it's important and, ways that all of us can be a little bit more curious in our lives.
So you brought up Sherlock Holmes. So does that mean you admire him or admire that trait in others?
I do. I think curiosity is something I admire in other people. I don't know if I admire him necessarily, but that trait in him for sure.
Talk about why, though. Like, what is it about?
It's so cool for, like, to see people who don't take things just as they seem and are able to, like, look a little bit deeper beyond the surface. Like, he can walk into a room and knows, way more than just what someone's putting on or what they told them. He can see through lies, and it's really his like thirst for knowledge. Like, he's very well read, very well researched, and that accompanied with like him just being curious and asking questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing about this topic, like we're saying curiosity and curious, but then like if you were to ask me how curious of a person I feel like I am, really what I'm thinking about, which I guess it is the same type of thing, like being eager to learn, but is that I like to learn. And I think that framed that way, it's really easy to be like, yeah, I love to learn things. Like I always like to, understand something or figure something out and explore things so that I'm always like taking something in. But for some reason, when I think about curious and that word, I think about like Curious George, and I think about more so that trait being something that like could kind of get you in trouble, or it's like you're always pushing the edges, or maybe being a little annoying about it, like, oh, you're being so curious, like you're asking a million questions. So then it's like using the word curious is like, okay, it seems like a little bit more of like a character type thing to me, but I do love to learn, and so technically, yes, I guess I would say that I'm curious. Do you think about the term in that way, or to you is just?
To me, it's like I would say I'm intensely curious because I do love to learn, and I do like to know why things happen and what's going on, and just trying to figure things out. So it's funny, I didn't even think about Curious George. First thing I thought about was Wishbone, like when the word, like all these explorers and private eye type things. Gumshoes, trying to figure out stuff. So I think it's interesting, to solve mysteries and do all that. That's kind of like what comes to my mind with curious. Mm-hmm. And I think it can be a double-edged sword, right? Like, it's great to ask questions, but also, like, are you being nosy? You know what I mean? There's like a fine line between the good side, like a double-edged sword. Fine line between, asking questions, because you're curious, and also like impeding on people's privacy or on their whatever.
But that person is a curious person too, right? So it's like, it's not necessarily like, oh, it's good to be curious, or maybe it is, I don't know. Would you say it's good to be curious, or does it matter like how you're using it? Because even like the town gossip, or people who just know everything about everybody, are you judging it by what people are curious about? Because also I don't think everybody cares about just learning and being curious. You might want to know oh, what's going on with these celebrities or what's going on in this world of sports. And, does that mean that it's a trait that's not necessarily good or bad?
Um, I'm I think the trait is inherently good because, wanting to expand yourself. But then also I'm like, are people who, just want to know people's business to, I don't know it, to talk about it or to, use it against them? Like, is that curiosity as much? I don't know. I guess I hadn't like considered that part.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like what's the span of it, because I think it's like if you're just eager to know about things, period. Like that's why I said like I kind of when I think about curious, I start to think also about some of those other things more than if we just talked about the journey of learning and wanting to learn. But being curious just to me feels like you want to, you just want to know things, and it may be whatever. So.
Well, and also like, or like want to feel things, want to experience things. So I think like being curious, like could also turn into a bad thing when it, it could lead to a drug addiction or could lead to very reckless behaviors because you want to feel that high or want to feel that, I don't know, getting caught.
I was thinking about that too, because also when I think about the word curious, I think about children a little bit more and how you might touch a cactus, or like how I pulled a pot of hot water over my body, or I got electrocuted because I touched something, or, those types of things where it also, we can say that's a good thing to be curious, because in those times you are learning, right? Especially when you think about it as a child, being curious allows you to learn about your environment or learn what things are, and be able to kind of process the world around you. I think it's perhaps how you do that processing, that makes this more useful for you, more beneficial of a trait, as opposed to just something that's always like, there goes, little Johnny again, like, because you're always just doing too much. But if you process it in a certain way, perhaps that makes it like it's always a matter of you're trying to learn a lesson or you're learning something, and how you apply that or how you use it is up to you.
Have you always wanted to learn and like wanted to know things? And I would say you're a really great question asker. So, I mean, has that just something that's always been there, or did you develop that?
I don't know if I always asked questions, and I think that even now, like mostly I ask questions not to listen all the time, or like it's not necessarily just that. I just, or maybe it is. Sometimes I like to learn about things or just see what people think about a thing, but sometimes it's just that I don't want to talk. Also, I think I've always really been into learning though, and I think that most likely that was a behavior that was rewarded heavily in my household, because I remember like I would have teachers who would like give me books and I would be excited, or when we got our 1994 collection of encyclopedias, like I used to just read them, and just try to learn things. I used to always try to learn about the things that I wanted in my life. So like if I wanted a rabbit, there's times like I wanted every animal, and so I'd always like read a lot of books about it, and I know exactly what I needed and all the equipment and what's the schedule of cleaning behind the pet and all these things. And then I never like got in there, never did anything per se, but I always wanted to be ready and like curious about it. Me and one of my brothers, we had a detective agency. I found some pictures the other day of like we made our own like identification cards with our fingerprints on it, and we were gonna like try to solve cases. The books I used to read were all like Encyclopedia Brown, Pee Wee Scouts, different types of books that was in the book, like they're learning something or they're teaching something. So I would always learn from everything. I used to love going to the library. We had our library cards. We'd go all the time. Like we knew the librarians. So I think that because I grew up always trying to explore, and kind of be in that world of like theater of the mind when you read a lot. And I think that's a good way to become more curious or to practice that muscle. And I think that's probably what led to that for me. So that's why, like, for me, it's like I can easily say I love to learn. I like learning. School's always been easy and fun, and I like that. But I'm also not like, well, I was about to say I'm not curious, but yeah, I also did, like, I used to eat paint and glue, and, like, if I would touch stuff or try to eat everything. So, yeah, I guess so. I have pictures eating dirt, like,
Same.
My little brother made a donut out of clay and put it in a Krispy Kreme box, and they still have it to this day with my bite marks in it. So, yeah, I've really have always been like that. But again, I think I can see how I would be shaped and molded by my environment to be that way. What about you? Would you say that you've always been a curious person?
Oh man, always the curious kid, and that's funny because I definitely ate dirt. I tried dog food. I thought I was a dog when I was little. Used to bark at the moment. That's a whole bunch of things. But yeah, my mom always. It's a whole thing. My mom always encouraged learning, and she would ask me questions and give me on the spot spelling tests and ask me what flower this is and what this is good for. Like she loved learning and she loved like my curiosity, and so she always fed into it. And I remember for my birthday, because I liked solving things, and she did this whole treasure hunt for my birthday. So I had to find the clues and do all the things and try to figure out, what it is. So I think it's just in my blood. My grandfather was also, one of his side jobs, he was a geological draftsman, but he was also a private eye. And so
That's cool.
I used to think it was so cool. I'm like, oh man, he's like in my head, like going on stakeouts and having shootouts. It's probably nothing like that at all. But yeah, just growing up around them two really like fueled that fire that I already had going.
So also what it sounds like too is a step further than just saying like our environment, our family, and how we grew up is also probably our curiosity and our love of learning is probably connected to getting that love and acceptance from your parents. Or that's a way to like, we're getting love when like they're testing us on something or teaching us something, and we like those moments, which encourage us to continue to like be in that kind of state, to have more of those types of moments with a parent or guardian. I think that's probably a big part of it too. Because now I'm trying to think of, do I know anybody who's just like not curious? I'm trying to think. Can you think of people?
Yeah. I mean, I know quite a few people in my mind that I like a couple of old coworkers that I don't think are very curious.
Like talk about like how they are so I can we can understand like what does that look like to you.
Man, I'll even say my stepdad. So my stepfather is not very curious. Like he just kind of takes things how they are. Like he doesn't, like I never see him like trying to figure things out. He's always talking about like things that he knows. He's always doing the same things essentially. Like his life kind of is pretty monotonous, and so I would say he's probably not very curious. And when I try to introduce him to new things, he's very resistant to change. Like he's not interested in trying to. It's like, oh, what's that old newfangled stuff there? Like he's not really interested in exploring new things. He's very comfortable with where he is.
And do you think? I mean, not asking you to like judge him necessarily, but do you think that if somebody's comfortable and they might not question the world around them or have that sense of really wanting to dive into things, but if they're comfortable, do you feel like, okay, well, that person's comfortable and happy and that's them? Or do you feel like you can sense like, man, if you just branched out a little bit, I wonder what else could happen for you? If that made sense?
Yeah.
Like, is it like, okay, he's happy, he's cool? Or, some people it's like they also can want to act like they want to be in somewhere else or doing something else, but they just don't.
I think he did want to do like other things and maybe at one point was curious, but life happened, he had to pay bills, and so he kind of just settled into how he is, and now he's happy with that, and that's fine. But I do think that there were a lot of opportunities and things where he could have expanded, had he been a bit more curious or wanted to try different things, maybe take risks, and he just didn't. So I guess yes, and like both. I think anybody is, if they're happy with where they are, like that's cool. But I think there's so many reasons why being curious could be a good thing in your life.
I guess I'm also thinking about too, like even with us having this conversation, right? Like, is it only gonna be falling on people who also are curious people and who like to learn? Because those are the type of people who listen to this, right? So I feel like it's almost one of those things where you're kind of either in a space or you're not really in it. And if you're just not that person and not into exploring or questioning anything or looking up stuff all the time or whatever, I don't know. It's almost like, how do you ever get out of that? Like, it's not like, again, you wouldn't be going to look for this conversation or, you know what I mean? Like, that's just where you are. And I kind of think about that sometimes with like confirmation bias when we think about the news, or people who only want to watch a certain type of bias of news, for example. And it's like, okay, you know what I mean? You're just stuck in that loop. Like, you're not there. What's going to make you get out of that? What would make somebody want to be curious or spark them to be curious?
I think life-altering incidents. So, like, let's say they get hurt and then they're trying to figure out a way to get better, or they start feeling really bad and they're like, man, maybe I should look at my food. And they've never really looked at, you know, the food they're intaking. So they start, you know, well, what's good to eat for me, you know, or they got to lose weight, or, and that's, I mean, those are all very physical examples, but also like, you know, if people are married and their spouse passes away, maybe they start to explore what they like to do by themselves and, you know, in the absence of that person. I think it's like life altering things, and or something that you get really excited about. Like, let's say, you know, life has been pretty good and then one day you decide to start a garden, and next thing you know, you love it. Like, you just love feeling the earth between your fingers and all that. Of course, like anything you're passionate about, I would imagine there's a healthy dose of curiosity for that.
So it sounds like something kind of just sparks you in a space. So, but even that, I mean, still requires you to like try something or do something, right? So, but I think I would agree with that, because even in our own lives, that's when you really go into, if you're already a curious person, I would say, and you like learning, anytime something happens, your first thing you're probably doing is like Googling something or looking up something or trying to figure out how to do something. And it may not always be a healthy thing that you're trying to do or figure out or whatever either. But I do believe that it's when you're going through something, and I'm not even talking about like just drama, but like to your point also, like if I broke my arm, like, you know, I'm probably like going to look into all these other things and like, how are we trying to heal it and do whatever. Or if I'm trying to work on my diet, you might research into your vitamins or your nutrition and all of those things. So I think it just makes sense if you're already in that space. And then maybe it just has to be a big enough spark if you're not there to go into it. I wonder what makes people who aren't that curious, like what makes them that way, or what didn't happen, or maybe what happened. Because even as a kid, most kids are curious. So I wonder if it's mostly a thing where maybe it got shut down at a point. That's what you would think?
That's one of the first thoughts is like trauma. Like, you know, you got in trouble.
You never start out like being like, not caring.
No, kids are mad curious about everything, but maybe they burned the hell out their hand on that stove, you know what I mean? And then they got scared to touch stuff afterwards. So getting hurt or getting shut down. And to your point earlier about, you know, being like learning, being one of the ways that we shared, you know, love or receive love from our parents. Maybe their parents weren't like that. Maybe they got in trouble. Don't be bringing them books in this house, which I mean.
And I don't even think it had to be that deep. It probably could also be like, almost like maybe your parents have to work so much that, like, you know, they just don't even interact with you around certain types of things because they can't be there at those times. Or maybe you know that your parents may not be able to afford some things or can't do a thing. Or you might be making that up, but like maybe you don't want to be a hassle, and so you don't ask a lot of questions. Or because most kids do, like, you ask a lot of questions, but if maybe you're getting shut down or like, please stop, or like you see that you're stressed out or whatever, you may learn to silence yourself, and maybe even silence that spark for curiosity.
Yeah, and then also like maybe trying to fit in, like maybe they got made fun of for being the weird kid who liked, I don't know, anime back in the day. I remember they used to make fun of one of my homies in middle school because he really loved anime. This was in, 2002, 2003, whatever. He really loved anime, but he also would bring his coffee to school every morning in middle school.
There was always like a couple weird kids. And I was even, like, I remember in high school, one girl was like, why are you always dressed up every day? And I was like, oh, I do wear like a dress or like skirts all the time. Like, I would really like dress, and it would be like a silver shiny skirt. Like, not that I was like, looked like I was going to a club, but like for a kid, it was just like, or I could just put some jeans on and like a shirt. But then I didn't even really think about it until somebody like asked me or said something about it, and I was like, oh, I guess I could just wear some regular clothes sometimes. But yeah, I think that is big, like your peers and what your peers say, what you grow up being celebrated around, or what's celebrated out of you. Like some people, them doing well in school isn't celebrated as much, and or they may not do as well. Everybody has different reasons why they might not be at a certain level within certain spaces like academic system, et cetera. And then it's like you got to have the right type of folks around you who can help you to understand, what this means, maybe, which might just be like, oh, you're more tactical or visual or whatever. But a lot of times we're not afforded that luxury of the time or being able to figure those things out sometimes. And then it just kind of might go into a spiral. So I would maybe think about, for those listening, like if you feel like you're curious or not, and maybe what shaped that for you. I'd be interested in that. But I have a feeling most people probably have the same types of stories about like they're a kid and they love to read and, be outside and do those types of things. And maybe you grew up in a neighborhood where you couldn't go outside because, it's safe for you to be inside. So you might have been sheltered. Like there's lots of reasons. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to also think of like something that's not so dramatic or doesn't have to be like, seem like a bad thing. But it's just, I still do think it's for sure like something as you grow up that even if you don't remember a specific incident, that kind of makes you the way that you are.
It definitely shapes us. But yeah, I would be interested too. And I was trying to think of like areas that maybe I used to be really curious about and I stopped. I mean, I still have the trait, but like thinking about maybe why I stopped exploring certain things or lost interest in stuff.
Well, I mean, you're going to lose interest in things. I don't think like being curious means you always care about the same things. It's just like certain things around you always just want to explore. But I think the curiosity like shows itself in a lot of different ways too. So it doesn't have to just be that, you keep up with the topic, for example.
Yeah, my last thing is maybe things are so rigid. Like if you grow up in such a very military, rigid style like household, there's not a lot of space to ask questions. Mm-hmm. And then even like
authoritative.
Yeah, very authoritative. Mm-hmm. Or even at school, like if you get penalized for asking questions, you might stop. Like if teachers, whatever. And then we stopped pushing the status quo. But I remember I saw this image. It was a meme, and it was like all these kids, and they had different shape of thought bubbles above their head, and the teacher was walking by and cutting them all into a square. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much what a lot of the American school system does, is they want us to accept things the way that they are. They were built originally to make us factory workers. And so I think a lot of times they're not necessarily sparking that curiosity or applauding it in ways that would encourage people to continue that habit for the rest of their life.
Yeah, and the resources just aren't being put there to do the multifaceted type approach that is necessary for so many different individuals being individuals. So yeah, there's a lot of issues with that. And I think that could be a good episode if we talk to somebody about the school system as well and like how it ended up the way that it is, or where they see space for things to change. And I wonder what policy and legislature might be out there, because it probably is a lot, where people are working specifically towards making different changes in the education system.
I already got a perfect person for that in my mind.
Let's talk about some tactical ways then that you can practice being curious. I'll say it like that, because you're probably already curious, but just thinking of ways that you can still flex that muscle and practice it on a day-to-day.
Man, one of them is like when reading or listening to a book, looking up words that you don't know. I do this all the time, especially when I'm driving. I'm like, Siri, what does this mean? Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Now I can actually understand that sentence. I was trying to think of the actual word, but that happened to me like yesterday when I was driving.
Yeah, I actually don't always look up words in like when I'm reading them, but I have a partner who they used to like when they're reading would circle the word, write it in the back of the book, and then look it up and like write the definition. So they also had like a word notebook, so they'd always write the words down. And I think that is good. I think I actually know words, then I'm like, I always might Google it to check and make sure I'm using it right before I like write something or do something. That's what I do a lot of times. But I could probably look up more language like as I'm reading. I do sometimes. Another thing is, and I don't know if I should tell people to be doing this or not, but I know people I know who are very curious, like they tend to pull their phones out a lot and Google. Like if you're watching a movie, you're like, wait a minute, what is this word they're talking about and that happened in Liberia? And then you start looking it up, like, the reference of something in a movie, or even who the actor is, and man, what other movie was he in? And like looking things up. I also think there's a thin line between curiosity and ADHD, actually. Not trying to be funny, but and so there also is that thing of, are you always like distracting yourself, or do you always just need to be stimulated? Because in the examples of people I know who do this, I think it's kind of part of that as well. But But I love doing that too. And yet I also would get mad if I'm watching a movie with somebody and they're always like every 2 seconds pulling their phone out, trying to look up stuff. So that's probably me being a hypocrite. But I definitely like to look up stuff, or I'll stop it and be like, let me see what the backstory was on this or that. So let us know if you do that.
Yep. Another one is to read more. I would say news, nonfiction, fiction, just reading different things in general to stimulate different parts of your brain. Like I know we talk a lot about us intentionally reading fiction and things that are not self-help and are not business because it can get like bleh sometimes. So just stimulating different parts of your brain, causing you to think in a different way.
And I think to stay curious about society and the world around you, that even things like The Economist or certain types of magazines or the newspaper or journals are important to skim and read as well, just because, quite frankly, the things that are put in front of us are not all that's happening in the world a lot of times. There's so many things going on, like on the continent of Africa right now, and so many different conflicts and good things as well. But it's like we don't even learn about certain news and what's going on. So I'm always interested in reading like in the front of The Economist when they have the rundown on like different countries and what's happening in different spaces, and thinking about like how everything is kind of connected as well with what we are going through here. So I would definitely recommend also like take some time to read the news. Or there's this email called The Skim that everybody back in the day, like it used to be a poppin' thing. And then I just found myself never actually reading it. But stuff like that where they send you a summary of like things going on. Or even like Blavity has a good email. They'll send like, you know, what's going on that day or every few days, like in the headlines. And that's part of the culture. Things like that. Like sign up for an email list maybe also. That's a beneficial way to just stay on top of what's going on. And things like that help you to have better conversations when you're out and about as well, and like just being informed.
Yeah, staying abreast of what's going on in the world. Another one is to challenge yourself to brainstorm 2 solutions to an issue. Like if something comes up, challenge yourself to look at it from different sides. Like if it was an email, maybe you write 2 different replies and just see how that goes, or just brainstorming different ways to respond or reply to a thing.
Another thing you can do is just challenge yourself to be silent more often. And you have to really be conscious about this, I guess, to do it. But next time you're out somewhere or talking to somebody, we talked about listening skills before. And one of the suggestions is to wait for a few seconds after somebody's done talking before you say anything, and just giving yourself more pause, more space to really just receive instead of trying to formulate things or, you know, cut a person off or whatever it may be. But that would reflect kind of being curious and being more open to like really hearing what's going on around you instead of you, consistently and constantly just throwing your thoughts out there.
And then another one is, instead of always making statements, like challenge yourself to ask questions, like where you would typically just make a statement. So I think that allows you to be present and listen, what's going on, but also helps you to learn things you might not have learned if you're always just putting your knowledge and your words out there.
Another good thing to try doing is looking for evidence when you see a statement made. So this could be on the news. This could be a tweet, for example, like before you retweet it, actually looking at some stuff up and saying like, is this valid, or what else has to do with the context of this? Actually reading the news story before you share it, etc. I think that it's a good practice to just not take things at face value and to question information in general. Whether it's conspiracy or it's like something just regular, like you should always kind of question things and, not just take in information to spitball right back out.
I love that little warning on Twitter. It's like, do you want to read this article first before you share it? But you put it out there.
Fam.
I also
and I'll never do it either. When it is one of those that pops up, I'm like, I know what this is.
Retweet. I also do this when people tell me stuff. Like, I love y'all, but sometimes when people tell me stuff, I'm like, I'm gonna research that. Yeah, I'm gonna research that, and then you'll find out like who you can trust and who you can't trust when it comes to information. So if you got friends who always, I put myself out there. I'm always talking about statistics and quotes and different things. Man, Google me. Make sure I'm saying the right thing. And then the last one is to make a list of things that you want to try or that are interesting to you, and then actually go do them. I think experiential learning and experiential curiosity are the most fun, at least for me. And so just challenging yourself to try new things.
Yeah, because trying things is a form of learning as well. This isn't all about just reading and listening to stuff. So I am glad that that came out, even though it's at the end. I have a list of things that I want to try and things that I want to go do, and I just work down the list. And so it's pretty cool to also, just be open to experiences. And also one of the bigger things about doing something like that is that I randomly will think about something like, oh, that would be cool to go to a Wimbledon match or something random. And then it's like, oh, instead of me just having that thought, let me actually categorize that thought or file those thoughts somewhere. So I do that now, even with my day-to-day of like how I do work and task and things. And I just find myself more often taking my thoughts and putting it in a file. And so be sure to, not just let things come in and out, but if you make a list of stuff you want to get into or stuff you want to try doing, it's kind of interesting when you think about, oh, wow, I really am curious about all these things. And that can also kind of remind you of, the world and the exploration that you want to do.
That's probably a great starting place. So if you're looking for somewhere to start, I would say start there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say find like a good like listserv or like an email or news or something like that of some topic or thing you're interested in, and start really trying to get into some new things. And and also making a list of stuff you want to try or learn about, and you can go down that list as well. I think actually, dang, I don't remember what book or something this was, but I remember seeing something about I know, it might be one of these. This the Business of Expertise, actually, I think probably this book, part of it was talking about how like if you have a notebook or like as you go through your day of work or whatever, things that you don't really know or write down like things you could know better. So for example, maybe it's like, how things are changing in your market or in the industry or whatever, or, little things that you could get better at. And it was like literally going down that list and like taking a certain amount of time to research it. And he said like, challenge yourself to write about it. So like write an article about it, and then challenge yourself to do something else and, whatever. But he talks about like how you consistently become an expert or how to become an expert. So there's a lot of tips in that book actually that were pretty good and interesting around like first just getting down the thoughts that you want to do better or things you want to learn. And then how do you actually do things to retain that information and make it useful for you. So that you can charge more or, be more of a thought leader or whatever, right? So that's like kind of a quick little professional turn on it. But that's a pretty good practice as well. Like challenge yourself to not just be curious and to learn it, but then how can you apply something?
That's a really good thought, and I probably would need to read that book. I had a thought when you were talking about that, and actually that's how I started making body butters, because I really like body, lotions and creams and different things. And I was like, man, what if it looked like to make one for my own? And I thought about this years ago when I still lived in Dallas, never did it. Out here, I was like, oh, during the pandemic, let me buy some stuff and start testing. I had 18 formulas before I figured out the one that I actually use now. But it was so much fun, and it has opened a whole world of other stuff that I didn't even know I was that curious or that interested in. And now I really enjoy making it and trying different stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. And then you never know what that could turn into. So we want to encourage you to be curious and to flex your curiosity muscle. Let us know what things you can do to try to, get out there and challenge yourself to learn new things and try new things. This week's shout out is going to go to one of our past guests, John Conyers. He was in, I don't remember the number of the episode, but grief is like a ball in a box. So he was on the podcast to speak about grief. But we wanted to shout him out because he has officially made the ballot on Michigan's 13th congressional district. So he will officially be running for Congress in Michigan. And we just want to wish him well and congrats on that. We love to hear our past guests doing cool things and making a difference and growing in their industry and in their space. So definitely shouting him out today.
Where can people find him? Or you can support his campaign or learn more? Yeah,
you can go to www.conyersforcongress.com and you can learn more about him there, or you can click the donate button. As somebody running for Congress, like running a campaign is pretty expensive because you have all the staffers and polling and all these different things that you're trying to do just to get the awareness out and meet as many people as you can, and you know, do some things within the community. So I know that every donation will be helpful. And I think on the 13th he's doing a fundraiser, also like a digital fundraiser via social. $13 on the 13th for the 13th district. So definitely, like, you know, even if you just give $1, $13, $1,000, whatever, I'm sure it'll be helpful for them.
Awesome. And then this week's question of the week is, if you could talk to an animal for a day, which one would you talk to? And what are some of the things you would ask them?
If I could talk to an animal, I would want to talk to, I think I would want to talk to a cat, and I would, I don't necessarily have a real question, but I would want to talk to a cat because I'd want to hear if they really have the attitude that it seems like they act like they have, or if we're just reading it all wrong. Like maybe they're like love you and they're kind and all that, but like it just doesn't seem that way. They're just also very independent. Or I wonder if it's just like, yeah, I'm good. Like, oh, here you go again. So I'd be curious about that.
I was between a dog and a cheetah, but I'm going to go with a dog because I would ask them, are y'all really colorblind? Like, do y'all understand us? Do y'all have y'all's own language? Like, I would have all kinds of questions. What do you dream about? Like, you know, how do you feel whenever your person leaves? Because it seems like it pains your soul so much. And then you be so excited. But maybe they're also misunderstood. But I don't think so. Dogs are a lot easier to read to me than cats.
Yeah. That reminds me of a high thought I had one time. I forgot who I had told it to. But I was like, low-key, are dogs smarter than us? Because they eventually learn, like, when we say sit or, like, no and things like that. But, like, if a dog was barking or making noise to you, like, you literally never have any idea what they're talking about. So I was like, I wonder, like, are they smarter than us in a way? Or is it weird that, you know, we kind of place them as a beneath you type of species where it's like, but they can speak English, like not speak it, but they can understand us, and but maybe we understand like some body language, but like we don't really know what y'all are talking about. So who's really smart? Just throwing that out there. Hot question of the week.
Bam. So hit us. Let us know if you could talk to an animal, which one would it be, and what are some of the things you would ask them?
Hope you have a great week. Be curious, live life, and enjoy yourself.
Peace.